Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Speaking Legally, where the legal meets the cultural, with our two legal experts, one on location today, and the second one here, Royce Russell Esquire, and myself, Dr. Stacey N.C. Grant. Thank you so much for stopping by to be a part of our conversation today, and we look forward to your commentary as you are in the chat, whether you're watching live or you're catching the replay. We appreciate you being here today. So, as per usual, there's a lot going on in the news, but before we get to all of that, Mr. Russell, would you like to greet everyone?
I'll just say welcome to another segment. Can't wait to give you the information that I know that will be helpful to you, either to make you or get you in the know or further your education when it comes down to what is happening in our legal system as it relates to the news and current and cultural events. But welcome again.
Absolutely. And as the year is officially almost halfway done, we're in the month of June. Happy June to everyone and all of the celebrations that are ensuing. So let's just jump into it today because there's a lot that has hit the news cycle. And one of that has to do with some NBA players. Not quite sure how they got themselves embroiled in this particular lawsuit, but apparently we have 18 ex NBA players charged with $4 million in a healthcare fraud scheme. What is this about, Mr. Russell?
Now, this story broke first in October and much wasn't made of it. But, you know, speaking legally is always current. And so, as we currently watch the NBA finals, the championship, let's bring up some news about some NBA players. And we don't bring it up just because it's news and we missed it. I mean, most recently, as of yesterday, I believe, Jamaro Moon and Anthony Walton, who are NBA players or were NBA players, they just pled guilty to the fraud charges that was levied against them by the Southern District of New York. So this is a criminal case. And so the FBI and their agents went out and they stumbled upon, and when I say stumbled upon, I don't mean that literally, but figuratively, they stumbled upon, after doing an investigation of NFL players that were caught and charged for healthcare fraud, came upon what was happening in the NBA by ex players. And so, most recently, two of the players pled guilty to this $4 million fraud scheme. And you say, well, what did they plead guilty to? I don't know particularly what they pled guilty to, but I can tell you the charges in general. The charges is conspiracy to commit healthcare fraud and wire fraud. Healthcare fraud is because it has to deal with the healthcare system. What was happening in this case is NBA players, mostly journeying people, and when I say journey people, that means people that were not stars, that were going from team to team and eventually found themselves out of the NBA, were putting in false claims, fraudulent claims for medical treatment, such as $48,000 for crowns. And that's what's alleged in the complaint, not from my mouth, but from the complaint, from the documents filed in the Southern District, in which that player was in out of the country. A matter of fact, wasn't even in. He was in Taiwan and was supposed to be having $48,000 worth of dental work, which
Wow.
included which included root canal and crowns. Now that's one hell of a root canal, $48,000 worth of root canal and crowns. Uh, we know what's going on here. That false claim was put into the insurance company. I'm sure the doctors that perform and help align these false claims were probably pinched. And when I mean pinched, that is not only a legal term, it is a cultural term. Put in a corner, box in the corner by the FBI to say, all right, who filed these claims? Where did these claims come from? And unless you want to be part of this indictment, then you probably need to be a witness and help us understand what was happening here. And that particular player who put in that amount, and that false claim, as I said, was in Taiwan when he's supposedly actually supposed to be in California having the work done. And so when you look at conspiracy to commit health fraud, what you have to understand is that that is a felony. That is not going away. And so let me define what a felony is. A felony is a charge, a criminal charge for which you can spend more than 1 year incarcerated. A felony also will prevent you from getting or receiving a lot of federal aid, public assistance. Not that these players would need it, but if you were a student and you were applying for a Pell Grant, it might preclude you from that. Definitely prevent you from voting for a certain period of time. It's frowned upon in the workplace. And if you are a journey person in the NBA and you're not in the NBA any longer, and you are 25, 26, 27, you will most likely need to get a job because there's not enough spaces and places for former NBA players to be analysts and commentators on the big screen. And a lot of these
Interesting.
people, a lot of these players are journeymen. And so let's just name some of them, right? We have Terrence Williams, played a couple of years for the Nets, moved around to a couple of other teams. Darius Miles played maybe 2 or 3 seasons in the NBA. Ruben Patterson was around for a while, but wasn't a very notable superstar within the NBA, at least by my standards. But then there were some that are involved that were superstars. And based upon the information that I received from the complaint and from court documents, Sebastian Telfair, New York's own, very prominent player, played with the Oklahoma Thunder, well regarded. You had Glenn Baby Davis. And the reason why they call him Baby Davis, it was a play on words because Glenn Davis was like 6'6" and weighed like 300 and something pounds, but they called him Baby Davis. Him and Tony Allen, who was a well-renowned player in the NBA and actually played for the Grizzlies for years, then played with the Celtics. They both won a championship ring. It is my understanding, based upon the information in the complaint, that they're also part of this scheme. And so, when you say $4 million, that is a lot of money, right? And so it adds up. If you are alleging $65,000 in medical claims, that starts to add up. And let me see, one of the players, and the way this broke down is that it always revolves around greed. Somebody decided to get greedy, and then all hell broke loose, right? So when you look at, it's my understanding, when you look at Mr. Williams, Terrence Williams, he had $19,000 in false claims and received $7,000 back in kickbacks, right? And that's what this is all about. This is all about alleging something happened and then getting kickbacks back. And then from what I understand, the kickbacks in total, not just to him, but just in general within this, was $230,000. So, we're in the NBA season. We're celebrating the championships. 2 of the players that were part of this indictment happened to play for the Celtics, and the Celtics are in the championship. I'm a Laker fan, as you can see. I got the Lakers right here. Right here, the Lakers are right here. I'm not shaming the Celtics. Actually, I'm rooting for them this year, but I thought it was an appropriate story. They didn't get the light of day. And we all know why, because big corporate America can suppress these type of events and incidents that happen, but needed to be talked about, given that 2 of the 18 have most recently pled guilty. And let me at least inform you what the penalties are for a conspiracy to commit healthcare fraud or wire fraud. The penalties are anywhere from 0 time, which could be probation. That means you have to go to a probation officer. You have to show the probation officer that you live in a law-abiding life. You can't have drugs in your system. You have to have employment. If you get rearrested, that's a violation for which you can be detained for 2 years because you violated your post-release. That's what they call it in the federal system versus in the state system where they call it parole or probation. But the maximum penalty is 20 years. Now, where things really get sticky is that if there is any identity theft, a misuse of identities. So let's say Dr. Grant plays for the WNBA and I play for the NBA, and I decide to use Dr. Grant's name as a WNBA player to participate in his health fraud, right? Well, then I would be charged with aggravated identity theft. I use someone's identity knowingly or unknowingly for illegal purposes. And the reason why that's important, because that's a mandatory 2 years of incarceration. Nothing adjustable,
Wow.
nothing anyone can do it. It's just 2 years. So, I mean, this is a big day because we haven't heard much about the case. We know it exists. These are some prominent names. And it's my saying once one takes a plea, then it's likely to see others take a plea in order to resolve.
Wow. That is something. Well, that's quite shocking. Some of the mandatory jail time here, and I'm going to let you continue talking about that as I'm going to be here silently taking care of a little behind the tech scene challenge. But this is interesting because they might not have known what all the consequences were when they were invited to participate in this, if they are indeed found guilty.
Yeah, I'm quite sure you never really look at what the end game is, right? And you never really think that this is a federal crime, and you never think that you're going to get caught. Or else, why do it, right? If you think you're going to get caught, then you're probably not going to participate in it. But they did, and they got caught, and now they have to pay the piper in order to resolve this situation. And when we look at this type of case, this is what we call a paper case. And in the paper case, it's really, really hard to win on paper cases because, as the Constitution allows and the legal system allows, is that you have a right to confront your accuser. And what that means is what we see on TV, what we see on 61st Street, or what we see in We Own the City, or what we see in The Wire, or what we see in Law and Order, or what we see in Special Crimes Victims, where there's a trial and there is a defendant and there is a prosecutor, and the defendant gets the right to confront the witness. Well, what are you going to do when the witness is a piece of paper? How do you confront a piece of paper? You really can't confront a piece of paper. And that's what makes what we call paper trail cases, such as healthcare fraud, extremely difficult to defend against unless you are alleging that someone used your name, used your likeness to then commit this crime, which is highly unlikely, given that they can do a paper trail as to when the checks were deposited, when they were released, when they deposited, who deposited them, and they could backtrack that way. When I say they, the FBI, that makes for a case to be very, 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 very streamlined and stubborn evidence. And that means that the check and where it was deposited and what account it went to is not going to change. It's never going to change. It's always going to stay the same. You can talk around it. You can give reasons how it got there, but for sure, it got there. It was deposited, and it's in your name, and it's in your account. So, I mean, it's unfortunate, but this is what's happening in the legal news. One other thing that's happening in legal news that I think is important and we should discuss, because it's been on my brain for a while, and now it is starting to come to fruition, and it's starting to make its way into law, and it's starting to make its way into the media, and it's starting to make its way throughout the court system, and it will eventually impact what the WNBA, what other sports, in particular college sports, look like in the future. And so what am I speaking to? I'm speaking to Louisiana's ban on transgender girls from girls sports. So let me repeat that. Louisiana banning transgender girls from playing in girl sports teams. I mean, this is critical. This is something that we need to mark down, that this happened in the month of June of 2022, that Louisiana was one of the first states to step forward when there wasn't a controversy. Usually there's a controversy. Someone tries to do something, it goes to court, and thereby you have the law that comes out of it. In this particular case, there was no controversy. There is no controversy. Louisiana is ahead of the curve in that they're dealing with the legislations and the bills pertaining to this now. And it really, really goes to amateur sports because professional sports can do what they want, how they want. And why is it important when you speak to amateur sports? Because you're speaking to collegiate sports. You're speaking to the lacrosse. You're speaking to swimming. You're speaking to women's volleyball. You're speaking to women's track. You're probably speaking to women's basketball. And so by saying that there's a ban that if you're a transgender girl, you cannot participate in girls' sports, then that means you can't get a scholarship to go to college. If you transition during high school, if you transition while you're in college, you can't participate in the collegiate sport itself. That is off the table because you transition into becoming a girl, or transition to become a woman, to become a girl. And then what that does is that I would imagine that there would be controversy surrounding federal funding as to that, because this ties directly into Title IX issues. And for those who don't know what Title IX is, Title IX prohibits the sex discrimination in any education or in any educational program or activity for which you receive federal financial assistance. Now, much is said, and you see a lot of collegiate football and basketball on ESPN, on a variety of cable stations. You hear about the big deals. The NCAA has been battling this likeness, college athletes getting money for their likeness while they're in college, whether it's a EA Sports, a video game, or whether it's doing a commercial locally or nationally, whether it's an endorsement deal to start to recoup, to get paid, what we call pay for play, right? So now you're paying and I'm playing a sport, right? And so now I'm starting to receive that compensation. On the positive end, if a student gets hurt, they receive some compensation. On the negative end, how would they act and how would they be treated because they are receiving this financial support? And how does that affect the school receiving financial support, right? But I bring this up to say is that some of the major sports, the football, the baseball, the basketball, and men's sports, the money that is brought in from that, TV contracts, is used for women's sports. And when you have a ban, such as Louisiana has, how will that affect the dollars of TV contracts that may go to, let's just say, a LSU, because LSU is a big football team, a big basketball team? Will the sponsor say, because you have this policy, that we then pulling back from giving money to the school because the school is banning transgenders from participating in women's sports? And so you can see how politics is now playing in professional and amateur sports that really, really, really cuts to the bottom line of how money is funneled to schools and how does that trickle down, and in what way it trickles down, and what's going to be the push pull from the reaction if you have a transgender high school student who wants to receive a scholarship to go to a school in Louisiana. So now you have to take that off the map. That person is not going to go to school there. And so when I see this, or at least when I read it, I was like, wow, I wonder what is the WNBA's position in reference to this? You know, I can only imagine that they would be open to transgender. And I was correct. They've been open since 2013, when the first transgender WNBA player was selected. And her name is Layshia, Layshia. Calderon. And she was selected, I think, in the first round, ninth pick, first round by the New York Liberty, and now plays for the Minnesota Lynx. So you have the professional ranks being open to this, at least the WNBA open to this, but we have the college ranks not open to it. And so where's the rub? The rub is this, is that if you're a transgender individual and you can't play, at least in Louisiana, can't play college sports, then how do you expect to be recruited and drafted by a professional team? It is some way analogous to having to pick which state you want to live in based upon the politics, based upon maybe abortion laws, based upon maybe whether or not there's a ban on transgenders being able to play women's sports. That's the overall effect, because Louisiana has taken the lead, but they may not be the only state that starts to implement this, start to, in their minds, be progressive in this way and taking a position. And the fallout, I think we will see in the courtrooms for years to come. And we will see this as it relates to being able to move on to the professional ranks. Because quite honestly, I can see someone suing and saying you're violating Title Title IX. And if you're not violating Title IX, you're impugning upon and preventing me from seeking a livelihood in the professional sports. And why do I say that? Well, once again, if I'm not able to be recruited because I'm not playing collegiate sports, then that is damaging my livelihood. And so I think that's something that we will see happening in the future. I think there will be a lot more to be said about it. As you can see in Louisiana, there's been a lot of protests revolving around this, and a lot of things are going on in the world right now. So it's just not getting the media eye. But as they say, and my friends in another country, in another place, soon come, soon come. I see this hitting the horizon, soon come. So just be on the lookout for that. Lastly, what I want to discuss today on Speaking Legally, which is something that we really need to be in tune, and I think we've forgotten, and it is so important. I'm surprised at myself for not bringing it up sooner, and that is dealing with COVID and how the courts have switched to a more video-related type of proceedings. And being a litigant and in the courtrooms and participate in video conferences, I understand this article, and I think it's an article that should have been out, and we should be reading and talking about it every day, because if we have a loved one that is incarcerated or not incarcerated, or if you have a criminal proceeding or a civil proceeding, the impact of video proceedings on fairness and access to the courts is something that you should be thinking about. And what this article spoke to is, yes, the criminal system, the legal system is catching up with technology. Yes, it is more productive in a variety of ways to have video conferences when you're dealing with the mundane, when you're dealing with the routine, such as a calendar call, or such as an adjournment. That means the case will be called another day. Maybe even when you're dealing with a motion that may affect the case. But there is an element of fairness and humanity that leaves when you're doing a video conference. The human touch means so much. The human experience means so much. It's the difference between going to self checkout, which is, might be fast, it might be easier, versus speaking to the cashier at the Kmart or at the Walmart and having that brief conversation. The experience is different. And so what studies has shown, the Brennan Center has done studies, and what this article reveals is that there is a slight of unfairness that happens. There is a slight of distance and lack of humanity that takes place in reference to presiding over matters when you're dealing with a video conference, such as when you're dealing with a bail application. And for those who don't know, a bail application in the criminal justice world is your time to convince the court why your loved one should be allowed to go home and continue their life while their case is still pending, as opposed to being incarcerated while their case is still pending. And so when you do a bail application or a bail presentment and it's done by video, studies have shown that courts are less likely to be impacted in a favorable way to give that defendant, that person, bail, a right to go home than if they were in person. And that's the human touch. That's seeing the sincerity in the face. That's the ability not to be distracted because I'm looking at you and you're looking at me, not you're looking at a screen, or maybe you're looking above the screen or behind the screen and you're not really engaged. And what this article goes on to say is that not only does it happen in the criminal justice system, it happens in the civil system when you're fighting over money or liability and you're trying to be heard and you're fighting the court or presenting a motion before the court and the court has you on video conference. It is easy to be distracted. The issues become far distant. And so where's the tie-in with speaking legally? Where's the tie-in? So you bring this up, Mr. Russell. So where's the tie-in? I bring it up because there may be a time that someone that is hearing or watching this segment of speaking legally may be confronted by an attorney and say, hey, look, do you want to be present or do you want to have the proceedings done by video? And I will tell you now, and I will forever tell you, no matter how much the inconvenience is, if it is important to you, if it's not just a regular check-in where there is no ramifications one way or the other, that you should be in person. In person is where you should be. And we know this because I'm telling you it as an expert. The impact on humanity, the experience of seeing someone's face, the hearing of someone's voice in real time, seeing the family members in the audience speaks volumes than when you're on a video. And guess what? The judge can't see everybody in the audience because those that are on a video, they're blocked out from participating. Only they can do is that they can listen over the phone, right? And half of the time the court is saying, mute your phone. Oh, thanks, Rich, for joining in. He said, you agree, body language speaks also. Yes, body language speaks volumes. You know, if you're crying in front of me versus you're crying on a screen, or if you're slouching, or if you look attentive, if you can see the worry in someone's face, then that makes all the difference in the world. I usually, when I'm making arguments for my clients, whether it's bail related, whether it's a calendar call, there is some type of physical contact. Bump fist, a hug, something is going on. And that speaks volumes as well. So I just want to make sure that we take note of this and use this to our benefit. And if you have a civil case, I don't care if you're in small claims court, I don't care if you're in federal court and you're in state court, if you have the choice to be present, you should be present. And do not let the proceedings take place by video. I think that is to your detriment. And we know this because studies will soon come out about trials that were done either by video. We haven't gotten to those studies yet, but that will come out as well. And so, do you rather have a trial where it's conducted by video, or would you prefer to have the case adjourned? I say have the case adjourned. Lastly, I want to briefly touch on the fact that if you've been watching in the news, you have seen how politics are playing a role in the prosecution of cases. And what do I mean by that? San Francisco, they had the recount, and the San Francisco DA was not reelected to become the district attorney in San Francisco because of his progressive views. And what has been cited has been the increase in crime, the increase of feeling unsafe, the increase of violence that has gone on in San Francisco, which has led voters to say, you know what, we had enough. And I think what you're seeing from politics, whether it's Republicans or Democrats, you're seeing this battle play out in the state level or on the state level when it comes down to safety in our community.
Yes.
And so this is a sign of that. And so we need to be mindful because elections are coming up soon, primaries are coming up soon, and every vote counts.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Mr. Russell, for breaking down all of this legal insight for us today, holding it down while we are experiencing real life in real time. And thank you, Richard, for tuning in and those who catch the replay. And we'll see you on our next show. Stay safe and be well, everyone. Any final words, Mr. Russell?
Everybody stay safe, be well, enjoy the summertime. We've been waiting for it for about 8 or 9 months. Now it's here. Live every day, impactful and to its fullest.
All right. Bye-bye.